Thanks for joining us today. One thing I'm very curious to learn more about. So iOS 14.5, which has been the topic in the in-app advertising industry for many months now, it's finally here. It's been live for now a few weeks now. And it's still early goings, but would love to hear a little bit more about what you're seeing on your end as far as adoption, opt-in rates, things like that.
Yeah, so I think nobody was necessarily expecting, but everybody now knows that Apple did slow roll the release of iOS 14.5. I think a lot of us were maybe ready to just dive in head first, and we expected a pretty swift ramp up within the first 7 to 10 days, but that's not at all what we saw. We heard through the rumor mill that Apple intentionally only let out 10% of the auto updates in that first week. We've seen the number climb a little bit since. We're at overall about 11% of iOS 14 requests on 14.5. And honestly, I kind of come into work every morning wondering if last night was the night that all of the rest of the auto updates went out. So we're constantly checking in. We are expecting that sometime soon, a lot of the rest of these devices are going to roll out. We don't really know at this point what Apple's waiting for. So we do expect that to jump up pretty significantly sometime soon, but in normal fashion with this ATT rollout, we have no idea when that's actually going to happen. In terms of like 14.5 specifically, we are, which is not a surprise, seeing an extraordinarily high percentage of this like lat and do not traffic type of user. Right now, we're seeing about 90% total of users that we don't get device IDs from. Now, if we're actually looking at those that were showed the pop-up, not just those that were grandfathered in with their previous iOS 14 tracking settings, we are seeing about a 20% opt-in rate, which is encouraging, but it's just kind of far outweighed at this point by all of the users that can't receive the prompt at all. So it's a very high percentage. Otherwise, though, we are seeing really, really strong adoption on the app developer and the exchange side with almost 100%, somewhere between 90 and 95% of our bid requests coming in as SCAD eligible where they should be. And of those, we've been really lucky to end up in the P list of 95% of those. So we have almost complete accessibility to eligible SCAD bid requests. And that much we're really grateful for, because we know then that we can bid, receive the attribution, and when Apple decides to release the rest of these 14.5 updates, the exchanges and the inventory will be ready for it.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring up SK Ad Network, and it's definitely encouraging that adoption there is definitely strong.
Mm-hmm.
As a result, are you in working with your advertiser partners, are you seeing them be able to run similar types of campaigns? Would love to hear a little bit more of, for the few people who have upgraded to iOS 14.5 at this stage, how has that impacted how campaigns are being run?
Yeah, it's a great question, and something that I think we weren't really sure how was going to shake out. We are actually seeing quite a few probabilistic attribution solutions in the market, especially from a lot of the MMPs that both us and a lot of our advertisers work with. So there are some situations where, contrary to our expectation, these campaigns are continuing to run as like quote unquote normal, functioning in the same way that we were receiving attribution for lat campaigns previously. We do have some MMPs that aren't offering that. We do have some partners that want to turn those attribution settings off, and we can support that as well. But we are seeing this weird situation develop where the reliance on ATT isn't completely necessary for everybody, and in which case those campaigns just continue on as normal. We are sending SCAD postbacks for those campaigns. We do want to make sure we have that data populating as a backup plan if those attribution solutions were to disappear out from under us one day. But that complete industry reliance on ATT and SK Ad Network isn't coming to fruition like I think a lot of us were expecting. This can change also at any moment. We really don't know how long these might stay or what adjustments might need to be made to keep these solutions around. But for now, we're kind of just working with our advertisers to make sure that whatever setup they want to put in their MMP, we are fully supportive of. We don't want to sway you either way. There's a lot that goes into making these decisions about how to move forward with ATT. So we'll be on board with whatever you want to do, we also do have a very strong history at LifeStreet of contextual targeting and optimization. This is something we've been doing for years. So when you take that experience, all the targeting and optimization that's been done, couple that with MMPs giving some attribution, and then also we did spend a lot of time developing a strategy and a solution for the Apple Campaign ID mapping to be as beneficial as possible. We're looking at this world where we can actually run anything and everything in a very confident way. We haven't had to turn any campaigns off. We haven't had to make any huge adjustments. We haven't had to shift major budgets. And I'll caveat that all saying it's only 10% of traffic right now. So we really don't know yet how things are going to shake out when this is 50, 75, 80, 90%. But for now, we're seeing this world where we can adapt to anything. And our advertisers just tell us how they want to set things up, and we will work with them to make sure that we can make that happen.
That's interesting to hear you say that. I think, certainly kind of going into it, it seemed like there was a lot of doom and gloom, a lot of discussion around, were advertisers and agencies that they work with really prepared for it. But it sounds like in many ways, just with experience targeting LAT users, with using contextual targeting, with a good understanding, it sounds like, of SKI network, it sounds like a lot of the advertisers and agencies that you're working with sounds like pretty prepared to deal with these changes. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I would say for the most part. I do think that if the situation was a little bit different and this attribution solution wasn't in place in many cases, that we would see a little bit less readiness overall, because especially some of the bigger advertisers in the space, taking what they're used to having, converting that to this conversion value setup that optimizes for event and information gathering while also trying to not keep that timer updating for too long so we can get postbacks in a timely manner and optimize in a timely manner. I think that's where the biggest struggle has been, is just finding the best way to balance all the different data points that they have to come up with that solution that truly is predictive of a user's value. And that's actually going to be beneficial in data gathering and number of data points and time it takes. That's where we've seen the most delay. And it's been convenient that we haven't necessarily needed that as much as we were expecting, as we do work through with our partners some of that. But everyone we know of that doesn't have that quite ironed out yet is very, very close. And it's just a matter of, days until that's ready. So for the most part, we're seeing everyone getting really buttoned up. I do think there are still some questions about strategy in this iOS 14 world from our advertisers, and just strategically if they want to make any changes. But again, since it's so small and since we have a little bonus, a little help, we haven't seen as much alarm, which is great. I'm happy that everyone gets to be a little bit more calm about it, collected, take some time to make these decisions, but everyone's getting really buttoned up. Right now, the understanding of what's going on feels very thorough, which is really encouraging, because up until even a month ago, there were a lot of people that did not, all over the industry on all different sides, that weren't really sure what was going on. And at least now we feel like everyone has a very good understanding of what's going on, what the options are for them, and then what the consequences are of certain choices that they might make and what that's going to change in their strategy.
Yeah, I think before it was actually live, you can maybe not have to deal with the consequences, but now that it's here, it sounds like everyone's as ready as they can be.
Yeah, it's time. You want to have that backup plan too, even if you are relying on the attribution options that are out there right now. I don't think that it would be safe to just assume those are going to stay in those exact form and function forever. So we do encourage everybody to have the Apple Campaign ID map set up, which we take care of on our end, have their conversion value set up, either set up in their MMP or communicated to us, and we'll set that up, the mappings on our end as well, just to make sure that we are collecting all of the backup data. If this were to disappear, we have a huge stockpile of SKI network postbacks that we can rely on and use, and we're not kind of starting from scratch in alarm and in a stressful way if tomorrow we come in and someone's attribution is gone.
Yeah, so that I think leads well to one of the follow-up questions that I had. So you talked about contextual targeting. We've talked a lot about SKI network. What other ways is LifeStreet working, with your advertiser partners to ensure that they're in a good position to move forward?
Yeah, so I would say overall, our focus at LifeStreet and what we think is going to set all of us up for success with this change in our industry is just being flexible. We always pride ourselves on being very flexible. We can strategize with our partners. We can test setups. We can test strategies to collect conversion value data around Apple Campaign ID maps. So overall, no matter what the scenario is, we want to be very flexible. With our advertisers, we do not want to force an attribution setting on them with the MMPs. It's up to them, and we want to make sure that we can work with you either way without any additional complaining or stress or anything around that. We also want to make sure that with reporting, you have full visibility into what we see and have another data point in addition to the MMPs of what that post-back data looks like. So in our reporting, which is available in a UI to every single advertiser that we work with, you get full reporting on all the SK Ad Network post-back fields, into source app and conversion value that we're receiving, into campaign performance by all of those metrics. So it'll be as easy as possible to manage these two different worlds where you're able to see the SCAD postback data. You're also able to see the normal install postbacks that come through as conversions, compare campaign performance, and get that additional layer of visibility if you want it into what we're actually seeing on a daily basis. And then otherwise, just knowledge sharing. We are very active in keeping up with the industry Slack channels. We speak with the MMPs regularly. We have lots of friends in the industry. So we've set up office hours for not only our advertisers, but anybody that wants to chat about something related to SK Ad Network. So if you've received that link and those times don't work for you, you're also welcome to email me. I'm always jumping on calls with our advertiser team to make sure that if you have any questions, we're letting you know what we know. This is hard. It's not been easy to figure out. The documentation is not complete. Sometimes what's published is not exactly how it works in real life. And so we believe that we need to kind of share our knowledge from the DSP side to the exchange side to the MMP side to the advertiser side to really create this full picture of what's going on and make sure that everyone's expectations are the same. And then we can best partner together to figure out what do we need to do to make sure that your campaigns succeed, and thus we both get to succeed in this new world.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a good point about, especially as it relates to SK Ad Network. And so would love to hear a little bit more, how has the experience been working with SK Ad Network? Has it been effective? What's been sort of surprising or interesting working with SK Ad Network so far?
Yeah, I would say the experience as a whole has been interesting. No one was expecting this to take over their roadmaps for such a long period of time. I am really glad, though, that when we did hear about this originally, and I believe Q3 of last year, we as a team decided to take it very seriously. We just knew it wasn't going to go away. So we started from the beginning, kind of going full force into support, building out all the UIs that we needed, building out the backend support, bidding structures, machine learning structures. We really tried to tackle it from all angles. So honestly, right now, we feel as prepared as possible to handle this. Obviously, if we are in a world where everyone's reliant on SK Ad Network, it will be different and it will be challenging, but we'll all have to get through it together. And at that point, all you can do is feel confident in what you've done and confident that you can pivot and adjust and, just get there. We're going to need to figure out what we need to do to get there, and we'll do that together. So right now, I think it's interesting seeing the already evolving SK Ad Network spec. We have seen rumblings in SCAD 3.0, which is in, I believe, the 14.6 beta, that there is some notion of a multi-touch attribution. And so I do think that we are going to be seeing updates and enhancements to SK Ad Network that do include some of the more traditionally accepted tracking and attribution elements that will likely make this more comfortable for people. And until then, we're just going to put our best foot forward and be confident in what we've built.
Yeah, I think it's definitely reassuring knowing that Apple is continually making changes to SK Ad Network to kind of help the industry as we figure things out going forward.
Right.
One thing I am very curious to hear your experience with. So in the days and weeks and months leading up to iOS 14.5 going live, there was a lot of talk of advertisers pulling their budgets out of iOS towards Android and potentially even out of mobile in-app
Mm-hmm.
altogether, in order to ensure that they had that kind of user level one-on-one targeting that they were used to.
Mm-hmm.
It's still early. iOS 14.5 is only live on a small number of devices, but in these early weeks, are you seeing advertisers actually pulling their budgets or shifting their budgets, or is it still too early to tell?
We haven't seen any of that thus far. And I couldn't say for sure if that is to us specific or if this relates to how low volume iOS 14.5 actually is. But so far, I think, a combination of low volume, a combination of these attribution solutions could likely be contributing to this, but we have not heard a lot of concern from our advertisers. I also think that this is a buyer to buyer difference though, because we do have a history, like I mentioned before, with buying on these LAT users. We do bid contextually and not every DSP has as much experience in that. So it might be a DSP to DSP and network to network thing if the advertisers feel like they need to pull some budget out where they were heavily reliant on the device ID. But for us, with our advertisers, we've been running campaigns like these for so long. We haven't seen a lot of concern with giving us some time to port these learnings over to 14.5 and see how that develops. I do know too that even if an advertiser were to pull all their budget out into Android, we hear all the time that Google is going to follow suit, doing something similar to Apple. Likely they're going to let Apple work out the kinks for them and figure out where everything's going to fall and then make a similar solution. So I wouldn't personally recommend putting all of your eggs in the Android basket, because there is a good chance that something similar is going to happen on that side as well. So I think it is in everyone's best interest to make the best of this and figure out how to make this successful. But for us, we have not felt any of that. I hope we don't. I hope that we can provide success to our advertisers on iOS consistently and don't have to kind of deal with that hurdle. But more to come when this ramps up, and we'll see how people start feeling and how the budget starts shaking out in the coming weeks and months.
Yeah, it's still very early goings.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess that does speak, as you mentioned, that we'll know more in a few months. So let's look at the crystal ball. 6 months from now, where do you see mobile in-app advertising, especially in iOS?
To me, there are two parallel paths and two completely different worlds we can end up in. There's one path, which is kind of where we're walking down now, where there's an acceptable attribution solution. And we're running in a world actually very similar to what we're in right now. And I mean, what we've been in the past. We're able to run LAT campaigns a little more freely with some probabilistic attribution that Apple's on board with. And we get to kind of keep going, with maybe some more restrictions, but a little bit more par for the course than we were expecting. Now that could go the complete opposite direction, and Apple could really tighten up and say there literally will be no probabilistic attribution. It's ATT, it's SK ad network or nothing. And in that case, it's hard to imagine what that world is going to look like. But my assumption is that if we do go that way, then there will be more pressure on Apple to add more features to SK ad network that let us move in a world that is similar to what we have right now. And I do think we're already seeing that. And I think if we are in that world, it's going to be okay. We're all going to figure it out together, and they will add the support to some degree that lets us function. That's a little bit more comparable to what we have than what we have from SK ad network right now. So, I mean, it's hard to say which right now we're going to go down, but there are two very distinctly different worlds that we could be living in 6 months from now. But I do find comfort in knowing that literally everyone's in the same boat when it comes to this. So no matter which way it shakes out, we'll figure out a way to push through it. And we just get to sit on the edges of our seats and wait and see which fork in the road we're going to take.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear you lay out those two paths for the future, because part of me thinks both of those are somewhat optimistic. You are still see a future where in-app advertising in iOS is still plausible and robust. Certainly there are some that saw the demise of the free app ecosystem that we've all come to know and love, but you don't see that, and you still see advertising playing a key role.
I do. I think I don't see a whole lot of benefit to Apple in removing the freemium world. I just think that's a pretty bold move. I don't think that the industry is ready for that. I don't think that users are ready for that. We just don't see indications. I do think that doing that would provide Apple some benefit with the games that they're putting in their own platform. But the industry is so big. The players outside of the littler DSPs and networks are huge. And I just don't see a world in which they tank the entire industry and everyone just gives up and advertising doesn't exist. It supplies way too many types of businesses, industries, people's paychecks and livelihoods. I think for them to really want to put that on their back of bringing the industry down, I just don't see that happening. And the updates that are already being made to SK Ad Network to me indicate that. Like they did go very aggressive and they are trying to make big changes, but I don't think they're trying to, obliterate mobile advertising forever. I just think it will be different as we know it. And who knows if it'll be able to stay as big, but I do think that it'll still be a meaningful business channel and an industry that will thrive in whatever setup we have to figure out.
Yeah, I definitely am aligned with you on that one. So one thing you mentioned earlier, of course, that there's likelihood that Google will roll out something similar for Android. We know that Google is getting rid of third-party cookies in Chrome by next year. Certainly, there's been a lot of legal or sort of laws that have been passed. So CCPA here in California, GDPR, a few others being considered in other states. So at what point in maybe the not too distant future is this type of, we'll say, sort of privacy-focused advertising going to be the norm across the entire digital advertising ecosystem?
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's only a matter of time. And I think that Google is going to be on the smarter end of this and letting Apple do the hard part and see at what point they can find a good balance of revenue and that successful industry and privacy and control. But I honestly believe it's a matter of time. I think probably in the next year, we'll see something from Google at the latest that starts at least walking in this direction, which is why I think it could be detrimental to just decide to do all of your budget on Android and make that full commitment when we know that there is so much talk about privacy these days and control over data. And we have the dashboard that Apple is introducing too that shows where your data is being used and by whom. And it's just not something we're going to get away from. We can't run away from it. We hope that the solutions being put in place eventually by Google are friendly to the industry and let us have control, but something is going to give. And I just think it's a matter of time. And I don't think it's that far off in the future.
Yeah, I'm definitely aligned with you again on that one.
Yeah.
Well, Samantha, this has been great chatting. Thank you so much for your time today. We appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you so much. This has been fun, and we'll continue to see how all of this develops. It's at minimum a really interesting time to be a part of ad tech and see this complete new structure kind of unfold and develop in front of us. So we are excited to see what happens and continue to keep an open mind and just put our best foot forward.
Yeah, absolutely.